Hey everybody, it's Alex Dorr, and I'm a speaker and trainer at Reality-Based Leadership. Today I wanted to run through one of our top tools that I talk about often in my sessions to really help groups get away from talking about why we can't or why we shouldn't have to and get focused on how we could, specifically when there's a change or when a decision has been made by the organization and you as the leader are just responsible for helping kind of roll it out and get responsibilities set. And so oftentimes when this happens, you kind of lay out what's going to happen as a decision or as a change in policy or whatever, and you just drop the news. And what you see in your teams, instead of just embracing it and saying thanks for letting us know and let's make this thing happen, you start to feel the energy of the room getting into, oh, that's impossible, or here's why we shouldn't have to. And in that moment, you might be thinking, I just dropped a pebble into the pond and I expect a little ripple, and instead you get kind of a tidal wave of negative energy back. And when that happens, it's a great time to realize that the team is in a poor mental process. They're thinking all over the place about what could happen, and they're getting into stories that are probably not true. And so your role as a leader is to not bargain and plead with them and try and talk them into it. It's instead to recognize that energy. I want you to stand up and get into a tool to make it conscious and visible so our teams can think through it more clearly. And that's what the Negative Brainstorm does, and it's one of our most powerful tools. And so I want to get into that right now. And so a simple example that I just recently had in a session was that an organization is moving to an update to Microsoft 10. And the first thing that was interesting about this situation was that most people were unaware that they were even moving to Microsoft 10. Now, one thing to keep in mind, as you guys might know now after one of my sessions, is that these leaders didn't just dream up in the middle of the night, I want to switch to a new software. I want to update our software to make everyone's lives miserable. That's not what happened. What happened is a change in the marketplace, a change in Microsoft has now fed us a new decision in our reality, and we have to execute this thing. And so what's happening is as they're getting ready to roll this out, there's a lot of resistance, and they can feel the energy from a lot of people going into here's why we can't or why we shouldn't have to or why it's going to be a disaster. And this is a perfect juicy moment to get into some negative brainstorming with the group. And so let's go through this example, and I've started it here that when you notice that energy, I just want you, if you have a team meeting, to stand up and just say, I'm really noticing that we have some concerns here, and I actually have some concerns myself because I want to make sure we keep those top of mind. And so what I'm going to do is I want to just make sure we write these down. And so what you do is take a piece of paper and just write down issues, and then start writing down the various issues that are being said. Some examples here are, we got a lack of training. People need to get trained up. We have hardware compatibility issues with the new system. We have to look at the timing of the rollout and make sure it's not in one of our busiest times. And so as the facilitator, you write all these down. The last one I have is scope expansion. And now, I want to go through the things to keep in mind as the facilitator. They're very, very simple. The first thing is, you don't have to announce that I'm going to do the negative brainstorm, everybody, so give me a second, and this is something I learned at Alex Dorr or Cy Wakeman's training. You don't have to do any of that. Just naturally, casually stand up, get something on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and just start writing. And don't really say that much. Number 2, whatever concerns come out as issues, you don't disagree with them, you don't argue with them, you don't bargain and plead or any of that. You just say thank you for sharing, and you write those down because those are concerns in that person's mind. And so you don't disagree with any of those concerns. Next, make sure that the responses aren't so ambiguous or so general. Try and get specific. So if someone throws out lack of training, for example, get specific on, is it a lack of time to do the training, people aren't skilled up. Try and get as specific as possible and break those up into concerns, because we want to look at each one specifically, because our minds, our egos want to keep it really general and ambiguous, so we can't really focus on moving it forward. So remember to get specific, and so you want to do that there. Lastly, as you're listening, you keep saying things like, anything else? Why else is this not going to work? Why else is this going to be a tough implementation? And make sure you exhaust the list. This can be 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, and as the facilitator, don't get concerned about that. Just keep writing. Now finally, you'll get to a point where the whole group has exhausted all of their concerns, all the issues, all the reasons why it won't work, and just thank everyone for sharing their negative brainstorm, their ideas there. And then here's the point where we start to switch the energy. Say, thank you so much for sharing. I am so glad you actually brought up, these aren't issues, but they are risks. Thank you for identifying all the risks involved with our update to Microsoft 10. I'm glad we have them all up here so we can look at them. So what's happened here subtly is in the team looking at this good mental process that we've started, we've gotten things visible. It's not under the spell of our ego where it can manipulate all of these things. We just started to change the energy away from issues and why it's not gonna work, which is really about our opinions and our preference, and opinions are trying to stop the action. Now we're into risks, which is using our expertise to identify risks. And we're talking about how we could get through this given the risks we found. So we're starting to shift the energy. Now, in your own words, or however feels most natural to you, the next step is pretty key. I like to say something that I'm so happy we've identified these risks. Now, what I know about change is that so often what we fear is false events appearing real. It's not the change itself that causes us a lot of stress, but it's the stories we make up about the change. It's the things we make up that could happen about the change. And so given that knowledge, what I want to do is check and see the probability of each of these risks that they will happen. And so I want to write a column here, P, for probability. We want to make sure it's probable that what we're concerned about is going to happen. And then lastly, I also want to look at, if it does happen, what would the impact be on the business? Now this is key. Many people want to talk about what the impact will be on their comfort zone, on their preferences, but who are we trying to serve when it comes to a change? We're usually trying to serve our customers, our patients, and so we want to make sure that we're worried about and looking at what's the impact on them and not our personal preference. And so we're going to add a column I for impact. Now that you have this all set up, now as a leader, you just start looking at them one by one and take your time here. It's like, team, let's look at this first one. We have a lack of training when it comes to Microsoft 10. What's the probability that we have a lack of training right now? And you just listen for the group consensus. Now here's another key. What'll happen is if someone said it, oftentimes they'll yell out right away, oh, that's high. That's a big deal. But then start to wait for the group, because some people in the group might be like, oh, well, that's kind of low actually. We have a lot of people already trained up. Or, oh, that's more of a medium because we can easily train people. We got fast learners. And so you just kind of listen neutrally for the consensus and make sure you get from different parts of the room or the meeting area what people are saying. And so let's say people started high, some said low. And so we just say, would you guys agree medium? And you kind of ask. And most people are like, sure, we'll go with medium. And then you say, well, what's the impact if people weren't trained up on the system? What would the impact be? And they're like, oh, I think that'd be high if they don't know how to use the system. And so you just take the consensus. You don't disagree with anybody. You might even know the answer, or you might want to negate it as a facilitator. Not your role here. You're just taking the input and facilitating. Next one, we have some hardware compatibility challenges. Now your IT people might jump in and be like, holy cow, it's a huge issue. And maybe we should listen to them a bit more, but let's wait to see what other people say. Let's say this one does come out high, that this could be a big issue. Now, what's the impact that it would have on the business if the hardware didn't merge together? They say that'd be high. Let's take that as the next thing here. Now, timing of the rollout. People are concerned, are we going to do this right in our busiest time? And so you ask, what's the probability that that'll happen? Now, most people were freaking out when I did this one about that it's going to be in our busiest time. IT's going to decide to do this in the worst time. But now that we get it out there and everyone now sees how somewhat ridiculous that is, everyone agrees that the probability of them doing that at the worst possible time was pretty low. Now, what's the impact it'd have on the business if the timing wasn't that great? They agreed that it would be medium to low because they could still get by. And so we got that down now. Now, scope expansion. They were talking about how there's so many options with the new system that you could do so many things. There's all these golden features you could add in. And so what's the probability that that's going to happen? The group consensus was medium. Now, what's the impact on the rollout if we have too many of these? They all agreed it was medium. Could slow it down. Now, there could be a bug in the system. Now, what's the probability that that'll happen? I just waited for the group. Now, my instincts as a facilitator was to say, if we're getting a brand new system from Microsoft, they probably thought about bugs, but the group thought differently. They thought that, there's going to be a high chance that there's going to be bugs in the system. And so I didn't disagree. Now, they said, when I asked them about the impact that would have on the customers, the people we serve, they said that'd be really, really high. That'd be really high. We got to look at that. Now, people are unaware. What's the probability that people are unaware at the moment that we're making this change? They actually said most no, but there was a few that were not aware. So there's a medium. And then the last one here, impact, they said it was low because we could just let them know pretty quickly. Okay? And so now that you've done all of this and you do it for all 3 pages, you're on to the next step where you don't let people off the hook. Now, what do you guys think you should do with the low ones? The ones that are low probability, low impact, if you have them. Most people immediately get it. Cross them out. Let's start crossing them out. Let's say this one's down there as well. Cross them out. Now, look at what's happening here. We are really combining this mental process. We're narrowing it down to see what we actually need to focus on. So now, let's take a look. What do you think we should focus on? Most would say high. So what I like to do is circle those. Bug in the system. These are both high. Given what we have here, those are the only 2 that are high. And when we did this, we had 2 or 3 pages. Only about 4 of these were high. And so the next step is where it starts to get really powerful. You say, everybody, let's just do this one, for example. Let's say there could be a bug in the system. I say, guys, given this risk is a big one that could happen and it'd have a big impact on our customers, what are 3 things we could do to mitigate this risk? And you just let it sit. We got everyone in here. What are 3 things we could do? And pretty quickly, you guys will be so surprised. We go down here, someone will jump in. And what I heard when we did this, they said, you know what we could do? We could take a dream team and start a pilot group. They could give the system a shot for about a month and come back with great feedback on where the bugs were. And I said, perfect. I write that down. Sounds like a great idea. Any idea, I write down. And then I'm like, what else could we do? They said, well, given the pilot group, we could come up with a frequently asked question sheet of like 10 things that might come up that you can be aware of when you are using the system. So frequently asked question sheet. And lastly, someone jumped in and said, well, I like making videos. I can make a YouTube video to show kind of a tutorial of navigating the system with most of the basics. I thought that was another idea to write down. Now, here was the fascinating part. We have now gotten into the top risks. We now have 3 things we could do to mitigate the risk. And so we're getting closer and closer to moving to how we could with this implementation. And then I didn't let them off the hook. Here's where you go in for the close as a leader. You go, let's look at number 1, a pilot group. Who out there would love to take this one and try and reach out to a few people to get a dream team pilot group started? And you stay silent. Now in this particular session, what was so fascinating about this is that when we got down to here, no one jumped in to volunteer. And me as the facilitator didn't panic. I just sat there. And they still didn't volunteer. It was quiet. Now, what does that show you about their level of willingness? Throughout the session, there were some hints that they were frustrated that their team wasn't willing to jump in a lot of times. But what does that silence show you about their own lack of willingness to make this happen? It was a big lesson for the group. They weren't all that willing to help out, even though they were telling others are not willing. And so that was a good start. Finally, we had someone jump in. They said, you know what? I can take that one. I'll start coming up with a group that can be in our pilot group to take this on about a month before the rollout, the final launch date. I say, perfect. Thank you so much. Can I get that list in a little bit of like a 1-pager from you by next Tuesday? Say her name was Sammy. Sammy says, absolutely. And I go, can I count on you to bring that in by next Tuesday? She gives me a verbal yes. Boom. I have commitment, which is the first step in accountability. I have something to coach on and follow up on moving forward. So I say Sammy by Tuesday, I think I said. Awesome. A frequently asked questions sheet. I go, could anybody get that started for us? Would anybody would like to take that one? Well, what was funny about this is someone in IT jumped in and said, we already have that done. we're planning for that. It's already done. I go, oh my goodness, thank you, Jim, for being on that. Now, the power of this is I knew that was probably being done, but if you don't put it on paper, the rest of the group has no idea and it becomes drama in their heads. And so getting that out loud and looking at this, now the group's seeing that IT's working on some of these challenges, they start to not be so fearful. And so Jim, already on it, I say, Jim, can I get that final or first proposal, first draft of it to me by next Thursday? Jim's like, absolutely, it's already done. And so I say, Jim, by Thursday, can I count on you? Get the verbal yes. Last one, a tutorial video. Thought that was a great idea. And they thought that was funny until I started to say, who would like to take that one? And I let people know who would like to take that one. And no one really wanted to jump in. And so then finally someone said, you know what? I think I could do one on my iPhone. It wouldn't be the best, but I think it would help people at least see that we're trying. I said, perfect, Steve, sounds like a great idea. Can I count on you to give that a shot? And Steve's like, absolutely. So I got Steve in 3 weeks saying he will have a first draft of a tutorial video. Look what just happened there. We have now mitigated this risk. We have assignments out there. And then as a leader, here's the best part. If you end with that verbal yes, the first step in accountability, I can 5 days later be walking around and have no idea what I had people close on with their verbal yes. And I can just go, hey, Sammy, I remember our conversation. What did I have you working on last time? What were you committed to? And if Sammy says, I have no idea, that's not a very good sign that she was truly all in to get me a pilot group set up. But if Sammy goes, hey, you know what? I was supposed to work on a pilot group and it's not going so well. Well, what else have you tried? What obstacles have you ran into? I can coach on that final commitment there. And so that is the power of the negative brainstorm. And what would I do next? Not let people off the hook. I'll say, here we go. We're going to go on to the next one. And we're going to look at these hardware issues. And we'd go through those and assign out some tasks, whether it's to look at other vendors, whether it's to look at who do we got to bring in for IT support. I would do the same thing all the way through. And what starts to happen is you start to see the whole group jump in and talk about how we could, and we start to narrow down how hard this is truly going to be. Because if we don't put it on paper in the form of a tool, and I don't facilitate that, guess where it stays? Here, in everyone's head. And they're out there kind of roaming the workplace with all of this drama there. And so that's the power of the negative brainstorm tool. I want you guys to know there's no way to really screw this up, because no matter what, it really exposes people's level of willingness. And as long as you just get it on paper, it's gonna get us closer to talking about how we could instead of focusing on why we can't. And so give it a shot. I believe in you guys. Lastly, if you guys liked this tool or want some more tools, follow me on social media at Alex M. Dorr and reach out. I can get you guys some great information and answer any of your questions. And you got this. There's no way to screw it up. You get mulligans. You will screw this up, but only daily. I do as well. Get out there, have some courage, and start facilitating some of these tools. I promise it'll change your leadership and your life. And let's keep ditching the drama.